Hey guys, this is Craig, and I'd like to welcome you to the Rebel Soul Syndicate. Thank you so much for hanging out with me on the podcast, man. I really appreciate your presence here. So this podcast episode is a bit of a launch, right? It is the same podcast, but it's being launched under the banner of the Rebel Soul Syndicate. It's a bit of a rebrand, right? It's a bit of a transformation of what was to something not completely and entirely different, but different nonetheless. You know, when I started the podcast out, The Black Sheep Experience, the idea was to have a podcast about the deconstruction of my faith and then the reconstruction of that same faith. As time went on, I dealt a lot with the things I was letting go of, but then the podcast began to become a bit more expansive. As my experience began to grow, the discovery of ideas began to grow, the podcast began to branch a bit or expand a bit. Now, all the subject matters that were dealt with, all those episodes are still intact under the banner of the Rebel Soul Syndicate. So you can go back for as far as you want and listen to any of those early podcasts, and there's a lot of great episodes, a lot of great guests, a lot of great information. So if you haven't heard some of those earlier episodes, I absolutely encourage you to do that, particularly if you're in the venue of deconstructing your faith, reconstructing your faith, or diving into manifestation, magic, those kinds of things. There's a lot of really good information and great guests. This rebrand or new name or transformation to the Rebel Soul Syndicate will still include many of those subjects, right? Many of those points of conversation will retain, right? They'll remain a part of this conversation, but the discussion is being expanded a bit. And that's the thing that really came through for me. Kind of when I was, or whenever I guess was led to make a bit of a rebrand or of a bit of a change. What I'm hoping is that the conversation becomes a bit more inclusive, that it addresses some of the difficulties of existing as a human being right here in this world. And so I think what you're going to find is information that is many of the points will remain the same, right? The discussion of divinity, the discussion of God, the discussion of the Christian faith, the conversation about magic, manifestation, expansion, all of those kinds of things. But the conversation will also branch out into other areas of life as well. And so I'm really kind of excited about this. For those of you that have been a part of this conversation with the Black Sheep Experience, you'll notice some of the same themes, and you'll also notice the expanded ideas on those themes and other parts of the conversation. Those of you that have been a part of this conversation for a while also know, or have been friends with me for a while, also know that I've gone through a real time of change, right? I had a 25-year marriage that ended. I had a long-standing career with a company that ended, and I for most of my life lived in Southern Illinois, and now, currently anyway, I'm living in Southwest Florida. So I've been through a real season of change. Now, some of those changes were placed upon me, and others I initiated myself. Regardless of that, change occurred. And change is difficult. So I had a couple of possibilities within that or this experience of how to approach change. I could approach it through the lens of what we might call limitation, or I could approach it through the lens of possibility. Honestly, I think we tend to live very negative lives, and a lot of that negativity is placed upon us from friends, society, culture. It's placed upon us, right? Ralph Waldo Emerson, in his writing Self-Reliance, talks a lot about how our true nature is superimposed by the culture around us. We go from being very brave and valiant explorers to timid and weak I forget exactly how he discusses it, but we become very timid and weak, just like sheep, following whatever information is superimposed over our adventurous spirit. And so we have a tendency to live in a life of limitation. Now, I know for my own self, I lived in a universe riddled with limitation. I served a God that was riddled with limitation. And when you have those kinds of limitations placed upon your life, when changes occur, we tend to not see through the lens of possibility, but instead of lack. And that was certainly my experience. And that's kind of what I want to deal with a little bit in this particular podcast. It's strange, as I've chosen to post much of my journey online. If you're not following me on Facebook, it's Craig Hostetler on Facebook, Craig Hostetler on Instagram, and the Rebel Soul Syndicate also on Instagram. I placed a lot of my feelings, a lot of my sentiments about the change that I was going through or experiencing. I placed a lot of that online. Some of that resonated incredibly deeply with so many of you. I have gotten, I wouldn't say hundreds, that's probably not fair, but I've gotten a lot of direct messages from those of you wanting to know, how did you make the change? How did you transform? Where did you find the bravery? How did you overcome fear? And on and on and on. And I've really enjoyed interacting with so many of you about that. And you're going to see some really great, I think, ideas through the Rebel Soul Syndicate, ways of learning, ways of experiencing life differently. I'm still putting some of those in place. I'll announce those as soon as they're ready. And then some of you were not quite so positive. Some of you were a lot more negative, like, dude, what the fuck is going on with you? You know, that kind of attitude. And again, I was faced with the idea of having to make a choice. How do I want to live now? How do I want to experience life now? Who do I want to be in the now? And how do I want to present myself to the world? I could have cowered down and gone back to Craig in the universe of limitation. Or I could choose to be who it was that most deeply resonated with the inner me. And I think a lot of you would agree that there is a you within that's very afraid to show itself to the world around you. You're afraid of the ridicule. You're afraid you won't be accepted. You're afraid if you chase your dreams, others will mock you or make fun of you. And I want you to know they absolutely will. Fuck them. And I mean that. They absolutely will, because when we begin to transcend the ideas that others have placed on us about who we are, that becomes very uncomfortable for them. They don't appreciate that. They don't like that. You're redefining who it is that they said you had to be, and they don't like the change. And particularly what they don't like is that you're moving beyond the realm of the limitations, not that they placed on your life, but that they placed on their own life. You know, Rumi said, stop acting so small. You are the universe in ecstatic motion. And so what Rumi was trying to say there is that you don't live in a universe of limitation. You don't serve a God of limitation. You live in a universe of possibility. You serve a God of possibility. You are possibility in human form. And see, for so many of us, we don't want to make twists. We don't want to make bends. We don't want to do things outside of what's expected of us to do. And as we do that, we place limitations on our life, and those limitations begin to define us. They begin to shape us. They begin to really form who it is that we believe we can be. So much so that we stop taking chances. So much so that we stop moving into the deep water. We stop, just believing. Like, I can do more than this. I can be better than this. I don't have to be limited by this. And is there a possibility of failure? Yes, there absolutely is. But life should be an adventure. See, so many of us are trying to get from birth as safely as possible to the grave. And what kind of life is that? What kind of existence is that when we begin to operate under the idea of possibility that I can accomplish, I can achieve, and part of living is living. Part of existing is to be adventurous. I sat in a small room, scared to death. I'd been given the opportunity to move to Southwest Florida, right? To Bonita Springs, Florida, just 5-10 minutes from the ocean. I had this possibility, but that possibility came with a job that I'd never done before, and it's not easy. That possibility came with leaving everything that I knew behind, and that wasn't easy. And yeah, I absolutely was scared to death. And so what did I do? I procrastinated, man. I waited, and I waited, and I waited. And then I decided, I'm not going to live like this. I'm not fucking small. I'm not timid. The deep, authentic me is a pioneer. The deep, authentic me isn't afraid of life, isn't afraid to live, isn't afraid to branch out, isn't afraid to fight battles. And I had to find that guy. I had to find that individual. And if you look at some of the posts on Instagram, you'll find some very dramatic, right? Very dramatic, like almost drama type posts, right? And I get it. And a lot of you have made fun of me. Good for you, man. Have a laugh. But I want to live a dramatic life. I want to live an adventurous life. I don't want to be limited by my fears. I don't want to be limited by what you think about me or what grandma thinks about me or the preacher or whoever, anybody in my life. It doesn't matter. I don't want to be limited by the ideas of others. I want to live in a universe of possibility. And so I have a black Volkswagen Beetle, and you can see that on Instagram too. If you're not following me on Instagram, you're missing a real show. So I loaded up 3 totes and a suitcase into the back of that Volkswagen Beetle. Scared to death, man. And I drove across the country. Fuck fear. Say yes to adventure. Say yes to possibility. Say yes to the most authentic you. Because deep within all of us, there is this authentic individual that's not afraid. This authentic individual that speaks its mind. This authentic individual that's ready to show the world who they really are, even if they're not accepted, even if others don't like it, even if there's judgment, even if there's ridicule. And there's been plenty of it. Yeah, a lot of my old friends have said, man, what are you doing? What are you going through? What are you talking about? What's happening? But more, way more have said, I love what you're doing. You're inspiring me. You're causing me to want to transform my own life. How did you do it? How did you move past the fear? There have been, and you know what? Even if there wasn't, what's most important is that you're living your truth. You're experiencing life the way that you truly want to experience it. And you don't have to get divorced to do that. I'm not saying that. You don't have to move to another state to do that. I'm definitely not saying that. But what you do have to do is release the inner you. Some people aren't going to like it. Some people are going to be frustrated by it. Some people are going to be angry by it. But this is your life. And you don't need anyone's permission to live it. You don't need anyone's permission to not be afraid. You don't need anyone's permission to live a life of possibility instead of limitation. You don't need anyone's permission to do that except your own. You're going to have to face some fear. You're going to have to face some rejection. You're going to have to deal with the demons within. But your life is worth living. The adventure is worth having. Taking chances is part of being a human being. I don't hold anyone responsible, and I don't have, as far as I know, I don't believe I have any ill-fated or ill-gotten relationships from my past. I'm not angry with the person that I used to be married to. Not at all. Wonderful individual. I'm not angry with any of the people in my life that think I'm a fucking idiot, right? I'm not angry with any of them. If that's what you want to think that. The only one that ever caused me limitation, the only one that ever caused me fear, the only one that ever caused me negative views on who I was me. Was me. I allowed that. I permitted that. I accepted that. I let their definition of who I was be my definition of who I was. So as you sit there and you listen to this podcast and you feel that inner individual, the true you on the inside, screaming, let me out, let me live, I want to encourage you to do that. I packed up that Volkswagen, man, and took off across the country. Went after the girl, right? Went after the potential new life. Went after the new job, went after the new state, all those things that were resonating deep within me, that others wouldn't like, that others wouldn't accept, that others couldn't handle, that others couldn't understand. I don't need them to handle it. I don't need them to understand it. I don't need them to accept it. I don't need them to like, love, tell me it's okay. I had to go after the thing that my soul was craving. What is it that your soul craves? I promise you, you already know it. You may need some meditation to find it, and we'll deal with that subject here in the next week or so. You may need to let go of a few things to get there, but you know what your soul craves. And until you follow the craving, you're going to live a very limited life. Until you follow the craving, you're going to have a very limited fear-based experience. Until you're willing to fuck fear, chase the adventure, and release the beast within. You're going to live in a universe of limitation. And I understand the fear. I understand the need to be accepted. I understand I think it's ill-perceived, but the idea of security, I understand all of that. I had to face every one of those monsters and slay them. And they still show up from time to time. But I'm learning to live in the idea of possibility and not limitation. I'm learning to live in the idea of I can instead of what happens if I can't. I'm learning to live in the idea of I can get whatever I want instead of I'm not good enough. Do those ideas resurface? Absolutely. It's not as simple as just a decision, but a series of decisions, a series of affirmations, a series of transformative change, a series of releasing the inner beast, releasing the inner you to become who it is that you truly are instead of what others want you to be. My life today is absolutely amazing. There's a lot of happiness as opposed to anger and frustration. And again, nobody's fault but my own. And that's so important that everybody understands that. Because we a lot of times we go through life blaming our spouse, blaming the job, blaming it's none of that. You're the key. You're the next level. You're the magic. You're the possibility. You're the path. You absolutely are the path. Why do I have this new job? Because I was the path. Why do I live by the beach in Florida? Because I'm the path. Why do I have this, gorgeous new girlfriend? Because I'm the path, man. And that's what you are. And a journey to where it is that you want to go, it begins right at you. So that's it, man. That's kind of what I wanted to talk to you about today. Look, you can find me on Facebook. You can find me on Instagram, Craig Hostetler, or you can look the Rebel Soul Syndicate. You can find me there. I definitely want to hear from you. I want to hear what you're thinking about. I want to hear why you have limitations or what you think you need to go to your next level. And I want you to be a part of the conversation. And if I can use your name on the podcast, I would love to do that. If you would say, here's what I'm thinking, but please don't tell anybody, then we'll do that also. But let's start living lives of possibility. Let's move beyond limitation. Let's move beyond fear to begin to live the adventure, to begin to live life. All right, guys, that's it. I am done. Blessings.